My mom calls me from the kitchen every night. She died 6 months ago in that same room. The house felt wrong the second I stepped inside. It was too quiet, for one thing. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of your own breathing. I stood in the entryway with my mother's keys still in my hand, the metal warm from my grip, and tried to remember how this place used to sound. The TV murmuring in the background, the kettle screaming, my mom singing off-key to whatever was playing on the radio while she cooked. Now the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the faint tick of the old hallway clock. I dropped the keys in the little ceramic bowl by the door. The chime they made when they hit the porcelain was too bright, too normal. It made me flinch. The funeral had drained everything out of me. Faces, hugs, flowers, a pastor mispronouncing her name as if she were a stranger he read about in a file. But it was coming back to the house that made it feel final. Everyone else got to go home afterward. I was already home, and yet somehow I felt like I had just arrived somewhere I did not recognize. My feet knew where to go before my brain did. They carried me toward the kitchen like they always had. Years of muscle memory tugging me forward. The kitchen had always been the heart of this place. Warm, cluttered, alive. Pots hanging from the rack, spice jars with crooked labels, half-finished crossword puzzles on the table. A radio with a bent antenna tuned to some oldies station she insisted on. Now it smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and something else underneath, something stale and abandoned. The counters were wiped too clean, the sink empty, all the cheerful clutter boxed or thrown away by helpful relatives who kept saying things like, "You do not need to worry about this right now." I stopped in the doorway and looked anywhere but at the floor. That spot near the sink, just to the right of the refrigerator. I knew exactly where it was without looking. I had pictured it over and over ever since the paramedics told me what happened. She had been making tea. That detail somehow made it worse. As if boiling water and steeping leaves were too small and gentle a thing for a body to simply stop in the middle of. She had called me before it happened. The missed call still sat on my phone, a single red bubble I could not bring myself to clear. I had seen her name flash across my screen that night and thought, not now. I was tired and the show I was watching had finally gotten good, and I told myself I would call her back tomorrow. There had not been a tomorrow for her. I lingered in the doorway until the back of my neck prickled, then turned away. I went upstairs, avoiding looking down the hallway where family portraits still hung, all of them now containing someone who no longer existed anywhere except in photographs and voicemail messages, and the too bright memories that waited to ambush me. In my old bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. The battery was low, the way it always was when you had spent all day ignoring people's messages. Condolences piled up in unread threads, all variations of the same thing. Sorry for your loss. Let me know if you need anything. I scrolled past them until I reached the earlier ones. The daily good mornings, the random recipes, the pictures of whatever stray cat had started showing up at the back door. My mom's texts were full of exclamation marks and oddly spaced punctuation. She typed like she talked. Fast, scattered, breathless. I opened our last conversation, the one from 3 days before she died. She had sent a blurry picture of the kitchen table covered in flour. Tried making your favorite bread? Not as good as yours, but I'll keep trying. I stared at the message until my eyes blurred. My thumb hovered over the little phone icon next to her name. The urge to call her was so strong it hurt. I knew it would go straight to voicemail. That automated voice would tell me the number I had dialed was no longer available. Still, a part of me kept whispering, maybe if you just try. I was still staring at the screen when I heard it. Honey, can you come here for a second? It floated up the hallway like a memory made of sound. My mother's voice. Not close, not right at my ear, but distant from downstairs, from the direction of the kitchen. The exact tone she used to call me to dinner, or to help with the groceries, or to tell me she had bought my favorite cereal on sale. For a long moment, I did not move. The hairs on my arms rose slowly, one by one. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The room felt smaller, like the air had thickened. This is grief, I told myself. Grief does strange things. People hear their loved ones' voices all the time after they die. It is a misfiring brain, an echo you really want to be real. Maybe a neighbor had their TV up loud. Maybe someone downstairs was on the phone. Except there was no one downstairs. Honey? The voice again, softer. Can you come here for a second? My grip tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. I stared at the open doorway like something might appear there, some shadow or shape. Nothing moved. The hallway outside was just a strip of dim light and framed photos. Finally, because not knowing was worse than anything I could have imagined, I stood up. Each step down the stairs felt too loud. The wood creaked in familiar ways, but they sounded wrong now, like the house was complaining. By the time I reached the bottom, my mouth was dry. I could feel my pulse in my temples. The kitchen doorway yawned open ahead of me. I reached for the light switch and flipped it. The bulb flickered 3 times before settling into a weak, sickly glow. The room looked normal and not normal at the same time. The layout was the same. Nothing obviously moved or broken, but there was a coldness that did not belong there. The air in the kitchen was several degrees cooler than the hallway, enough that my skin prickled. The chair my mom always sat in, end of the table, facing the window, was pulled out slightly, as if someone had just pushed it back to stand up. I had not left it like that. I knew I had pushed all the chairs in after everyone left earlier, tidying up because it gave me something to do. My gaze slid toward the counter. An old dented pot sat near the stove, lid askew. My chest tightened. I had washed that pot, dried it, and packed it into a box 2 days ago while my aunt talked at me about estate papers and utilities. I remembered taping the box shut. My breath hitched. I took a small step forward, then another, as if I might startle the scene and make it rearrange itself back to something sensible. My phone buzzed in my hand. The sudden vibration made me jump. My thumb fumbled at the screen. A new notification blinked up at me. Voicemail. Unknown number. Timestamp. 11:47 p.m., 2 minutes ago. My mouth had gone completely dry. I tapped the notification and brought the phone closer to my ear. The message began playing immediately. There was a brief crackle of static and then, "Honey, why will you not come to the kitchen when I call you?" My mother's voice. Clear, close, as if she were standing right next to me. Behind her words, in the thin layer of background sound the phone always captures, I heard something that made my knees weaken. The slow creak of floorboards. The faint tap of cautious footsteps entering the kitchen. My footsteps. I do not remember dropping the phone, but I must have, because the next thing I knew it was face down on the tile and my hands were empty. For a while, I just stood there in the middle of the kitchen, listening to the tiny echo of my own breath in the recording still playing from the floor. My footsteps in the voicemail matched the way I had just walked into the room. The tiny creak of the third board. The soft brush of my sleeve against the counter. By the time the message ended, I had pressed myself back against the refrigerator, as if the cold metal could somehow protect me. Eventually, instinct took over. I grabbed the phone, ended the playback, and did the one thing that felt remotely rational. I opened the call log. The unknown number sat at the top of the list, just a string of digits with no name. I tapped it, expecting to see just that one call. Instead, the list scrolled. Same number, same timestamp, night after night, always around 11:45 p.m. The first one was the night of the funeral. The second night, the third, the fourth. Some marked missed, some marked voicemail. Every single night like clockwork. My stomach twisted. The dates blurred together. I had been so caught up in paperwork and casseroles and people telling me I was being so strong that I had not even noticed my phone quietly ringing itself into madness on my nightstand. I hit the call button before I could talk myself out of it. The line rang once. Just one single sharp tone. Then it cut off. Static seeped into my ear, thin at first, like the sound between stations on an old radio. I pulled the phone away, checked the screen to see if the call had dropped, but it still showed the timer counting seconds. Hello? My voice sounded small and dry. The static shivered. Beneath it, something moved, like a breath through gravel. I strained to hear, heart pounding. I am still here. The words were barely more than a texture in the noise, but I heard them. Not quite my mother's voice, not quite something else. Like someone humming along with a song and missing half the notes. I hung up. For the rest of the night, I did not go back into the kitchen. The days that followed should have blurred into one another, but the kitchen made each one distinct. The first morning, I came downstairs and found a mug in the sink. My mother's favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim and faded sunflowers. A pink lipstick stain curled along the edge. I had washed that mug and put it in the cabinet after she died. I remembered doing it in a daze while my cousin talked about funeral arrangements. I stood there for a long time, staring at the smear of lipstick. Then I washed it again, scrubbed until the stain faded, dried the mug, and set it carefully back in the cabinet. The next morning, the mug was back in the sink, same side facing up. Fresh stain, slightly smudged, like she had taken just one sip. On the third morning, there was a plate on the counter with a single slice of burnt toast on it. The smell hit me before I saw it. That sharp, bitter scent of bread forgotten in the toaster. My mom had never mastered the dial. She always claimed she liked it that way, black around the edges, scraped over the sink with a butter knife. I had not bought bread since I came back to the house. I threw the toast away, washed the plate, and checked the toaster. Clean. Empty. I unplugged it for good measure. That afternoon, while sorting through a stack of sympathy cards at the table, the radio on the counter clicked on. I jumped. The kitchen filled with the soft crackle of an oldies station, my mother's favorite song drifting into the air like it had been waiting for a cue. The same song she used to hum while baking? Her baking song, she called it. The radio's little red power light gleamed. Its cord dangled loose over the edge of the counter, nowhere near the outlet. I walked over slowly, like approaching a wild animal. My hand shook as I turned the dial. The music cut off mid-chorus. The red light went dark. I stared at the unplugged cord until it began to feel like it was staring back. That night, I decided to stop reacting and start observing. I put everything back the way it should be. Mug dry and upside down in the cabinet, plates stacked, toaster unplugged, radio pushed against the wall with its cord coiled neatly on top. I took a photo of the kitchen from the doorway just to be sure. Evidence, in case I ever started doubting myself. Then I waited. At 11:40, I sat in the darkened hallway, back against the wall, knees pulled to my chest. The kitchen doorway was a rectangle of deeper shadow at the end of the hall. My phone rested in my hands, screen dim, notes app open and ready. The house ticked and sighed around me. Pipes settled. The clock downstairs chimed the half hour. My legs began to tingle. At exactly 11:45, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Same unknown number. Same arrangement of digits I could now recite without looking. The call rang once, then stopped. A moment later, from the kitchen, I heard my mother's voice. "Honey, come help me in the kitchen." The phrasing was different, but the tone was the same familiar, gentle command as always. Warm, mildly annoyed, as if I had let dinner get cold. I did not answer. I did not move. Instead, I typed with clumsy fingers into the note I had already started. "What do you want?" The question glowed on the screen. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, from the dark kitchen, the radio crackled to life. No music this time. Just a droning, like static searching for a station. The sound bent and twisted, reshaped into syllables. "I want you with me." My mother's voice carried down the hallway, but there was a wrongness in it now. Something off in the rhythm. Like someone reading lines phonetically in a language they did not quite understand. In the days that followed, I started asking questions. I pretended at first that I was talking to myself, or to the empty house, just in case some neighbor was close enough to hear. I kept my voice casual, as if I were reminiscing. "What did we eat the night before you left?" I asked, standing in the kitchen with my hands wrapped around a glass of water I did not really want. The answer floated back from nowhere and everywhere at once, riding on a faint hum from the radio. You made that pasta you like. With the mushrooms. You burned the garlic. We had eaten soup that night. She had complained it was too salty. I had offered to order takeout, and she had rolled her eyes and said, "We are not helpless." I swallowed. "What was the nickname you had for me when I broke my arm?" There was no hesitation. "My little porcelain bird." That was correct. I had hated that nickname, the way it made me feel fragile and decorative. She had stopped using it when I was 15, after a fight where I told her I did not want to be breakable anymore. Hearing it now, dragged out of the past like a puppet, made my skin crawl. The thing wearing her voice was getting a lot right. Too much. But the wrong pieces were what stuck with me. The way it described dinners that never happened. The way it insisted on nicknames that had been laid to rest years ago. It knew the facts, but not the feelings. Whatever was speaking to me knew my mother. It did not know how to be her. The realization did not make the calls stop. If anything, they seemed to grow more insistent. The mug in the sink. The toast on the plate. The radio turning on at odd hours, playing songs tied to memories I wanted to keep clean. So I did the only thing left that felt like control. I decided to record it. One night, before bed, I opened the voice recorder app on my phone, set the sensitivity as high as it would go, and placed the phone in the center of the kitchen table. I made sure the room was exactly as I wanted it. Chairs pushed in, counters clear, radio unplugged and turned to face the wall. I took another photo for good measure. "Let us see what you do when I'm not listening," I muttered, feeling ridiculous for talking to an empty room. Then I turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs. I lay awake for a long time, listening for footsteps that never came, for voices that stayed politely quiet. At some point, exhaustion finally dragged me under. In the morning, gray light filtered through the curtains when I stumbled back down. The kitchen looked unchanged, mug in its place, toaster still unplugged, radio still lifeless. For a moment, I wondered if the previous nights had been some elaborate trick my grief had played on me. Then I picked up the phone from the table. The recording time showed 8 hours, 17 minutes. I took the phone into the living room and sat on the couch. I pressed play and stared at the blank television screen while the audio rolled. For a long time, there was nothing. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the house settling, my own footsteps, distant, as I went upstairs the night before. Then more silence. At around 3 hours in, I heard it, a chair leg scraping against tile. Slow, deliberate. The sound echoed faintly, like it was happening in a larger space than my small kitchen should allow. Footsteps followed, pacing, back and forth, heel and toe on the tile, pausing near where the phone must have been. I could almost see it in my mind. Some figure tracing the outline of the room. Then my mother's voice, but strained now, ragged around the edges as if pulled too tight. "Stop copying me. Stop wearing my voice." The sound of her anger was like a physical blow. I had not heard that specific tone since I was a teenager, since the last big argument we had before I left for college. There was a pause, a scrape, a sound like someone leaning close to the phone. Then a second voice replied, low and scraping like stones dragged across metal. "They come when I sound like you." I must have listened to that last line a dozen times. "They come when I sound like you." Every replay made it worse. Whatever was pacing my kitchen had learned my mother's voice the way a child might learn a song. Repetition until the shape fit in its throat. It was not trying to comfort me. It was advertising. By the next day, the house felt too small to contain that knowledge. The air in the kitchen tasted thick and metallic, like breathing through a coin. I found myself standing in the doorway but unable to cross the tile, as if the grout lines were some sort of invisible boundary. So I left. I did not go far, just across town to the one family member I had been avoiding, my mother's older sister, Marianne. We had not spoken in years, not because of some dramatic fight, but because my mother had gently steered me away from her with phrases like, "She is a little dramatic," and She always did have an overactive imagination. When she opened the door and saw me on her porch, her eyes went wide and wet. Alex. She said my name like it hurt. You look just like her when you stand like that. Her house smelled like lavender and old paper. While she made tea, I sat at her kitchen table, trying not to notice that her kitchen felt normal. Just a room where food was made, not some waiting mouth. How are you holding up? She asked, finally sitting across from me. The question was standard, but the way she held her cup suggested she already knew the answer. I listened to something, I said. A recording. From the kitchen. The words sounded ridiculous out loud, like lines from a bad movie, but once they started, I could not stop them. I told her about the calls, the mug, the toast, the radio. I told her about the voice on the recording complaining about being copied. When I was finished, Marianne looked down into her tea for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I remembered. She did not tell you, did she? Tell me what? That kitchen has never been right. I frowned. What do you mean, never? Marianne sighed. Even when we were young, appliances would turn on by themselves. The oven, the blender, the radio. Your grandmother used to say the house was just old. That wiring does strange things, but you would be standing at the counter and hear someone say your name right behind your ear, clear as anything. You turn around and there is no one there. It always started near the sink. I pictured the spot on the floor I refused to look at. She said it got worse after you were born, she continued. Voices when she was cooking alone. The kettle screaming when it was not even on the stove. She thought whatever it is had taken a liking to you. That it liked calling for you. My mouth went dry. Why did she never leave? She tried, Marianne said. Once, years ago. But every time she started talking about moving, things would happen. Knives falling, the radio turning itself on all night. She stopped sleeping properly. In these last months, she would call me and whisper like she was afraid the room was listening. She said the kitchen did not like the dark, and she was afraid of being in there at night. My hands tightened around my cup. The night she died, I said slowly. Did she call you? Marianne's gaze snapped to mine. No, but she said she might call you. She said if something happened, she wanted you to know it was not natural. The guilt I had been carrying around my ribs shifted, grew teeth. There was one call I had never listened to. One voicemail still sitting in my inbox, its notification cleared but the message untouched. I knew exactly when it had come in. I remembered seeing it pop up on my screen and flipping the phone face down. When I got back home, the house felt like it had been holding its breath while I was gone. I did not go to the kitchen. I went straight upstairs to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my voicemail. The list of messages scrolled by. Condolences, robocalls. Then near the bottom, the one with the date from 6 months ago. Time, 11:43 p.m., the night she died. For a moment, I hovered over it, my thumb trembling. Then I pressed play. There was no greeting. No, hey, honey. No attempt at sounding normal. My mother's voice came through in a harsh whisper, like she was hiding in a closet. Something is in the kitchen with me, she breathed. It is calling you in my voice. Do not come home tonight, do you hear me? Do not. A wet, dragging sound interrupted her, like something heavy being pulled across tile. She gasped. There was a thud, sharp and final, and then her voice again, but not quite. A breathy echo of it, overlapping itself, like two people trying to speak through the same mouth. My name tangled on their tongues, stretched into something thin. The message cut off. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. For the first time, the image I had been carrying of my mother's last moments shattered. She had not simply fallen. She had been pulled. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence that followed the recording, feeling like someone had tilted the world slightly out of alignment. That night, I did not need to check the clock to know when it was almost time. The air in the house sharpened. The shadows in the hallway thickened. By the time my phone buzzed in my hand, I was already standing at the top of the stairs. I looked at the screen. The unknown number was gone. In its place, Mom. Her name, her old contact photo, the one of her squinting into the sun at the beach, hair blown back, smile too wide. My thumb hovered, but I answered before I could lose my nerve. Hello? For a moment, there was only breathing. Then her voice, clearer than it had ever been through a phone, but shaking. He is using me, she said. I could hear tears in it, the way her words hitched. He wants you. Do not step into the kitchen. Please, promise me. Her voice broke on the last word. Behind her, like a tide under a smaller wave, the low, scraping tone rolled in. You ignored her last time. It murmured, smooth and pleased. You will not ignore her again. The call dropped. My screen went dark. Every light in the house flickered. Then they went out. I stood in a darkness so complete it felt solid. For a second, panic swelled in my chest. Then, slowly, a faint glow bled into the hallway from downstairs. Sickly yellow, the color of old fat. It seeped under the kitchen door frame, painting the edges of the tiles in a false dawn. The smell hit me next. Her stew. The one she made on cold nights, thick and rich, simmered for hours. Carrots, onions, bay leaves, warmth and safety and home. Only now there was something sour under it, something that made my tongue feel coated. I went down the stairs as if pulled. Each step took me closer to the light, to the smell, to the memory of sitting at that table as a child while she ladled steaming stew into my bowl. I stopped at the edge of the kitchen tiles. The line between the hallway's wood floor and the kitchen's cold ceramic looked enormous. Crossing it felt like crossing a border I did not fully understand. Inside the room, the light flickered, brightening and dimming like a heartbeat. Shadows moved where nothing should move. Sweetheart, my mother's voice called, very close now, as if she were just beyond the doorway. I cannot reach you unless you come in. Beneath it, the deeper voice curled like smoke. Just one step. I stood there, heart hammering, every childhood memory of that room crowding around me. Birthday cakes, burnt toast, flour on her hands. The guilt of that ignored call pressing against my spine, urging me forward. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. A new incoming call lit up the screen. Caller ID. Me, not just the word. My contact photo. The one I had taken months ago without thinking, but shifting. The thumbnail moved, a live image of me standing right where I was at the threshold, eyes wide, phone in hand. The angle was wrong. It was taken from inside the kitchen. My thumb hovered over the green button. Accept. Decline. The options pulsed softly. In the kitchen, the light flickered faster. The smell of stew grew stronger, wrapping around me, coaxing. On the other side of the doorway, my mother's voice asked one more time, almost tender. Honey, can you come to the kitchen for a second?